They say love can be a beautiful thing, but what if your dream date turned into a waking nightmare? Imagine meeting someone who seems perfect until they reveal a side of themselves that chills you to the bone. From unsettling obsessions to dates that vanish without a trace, these 11 true dating horror street stories from Reddit will make you think twice before swiping right. So grab your headphones, let the rain set the mood, and prepare yourself for the most disturbing dating encounters ever shared. Let's begin. I never thought I would be the kind of person who ignored red flags. I always believed I had good instincts, that I could tell when something was not right. But I learned the hard way that some people do not show their true nature until they are already too close. It started like any normal relationship. I met her at a coffee shop, and we clicked instantly. She was charming, funny, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. We went on a few dates, and everything seemed perfect. She was sweet, affectionate, always texting me good morning, and checking in throughout the day. At first, I thought it was endearing. I had been in relationships before where communication was lacking, so this kind of attention felt like a refreshing change. But looking back, I realize how quickly she started making herself a part of my life, how smoothly she slipped into my daily routine without me even noticing. She started staying over more and more, and I did not think much of it at first. We were dating after all, so it made sense that she would spend nights at my place. But one evening, I found something odd. I reached for a towel in the bathroom and found a small, unfamiliar bottle of shampoo tucked underneath the stack. It was not mine, and it was not something I remembered seeing her bring. I brushed it off, assuming she had left it there by mistake. But then I started noticing more things. A pair of socks under my bed that were too small to be mine. A toothbrush in my bathroom cabinet that I never bought. A hoodie draped over my couch that I had never seen her wear. I asked her about it once, and she laughed, saying she just wanted to feel at home when she was with me. It made sense at the time, so I let it go. But then it got stranger. One night, I rolled over in bed and felt something hard pressing into my back. When I reached under my mattress, I pulled out a hairbrush. It was wedged between my mattress and the box spring, as if someone had deliberately hidden it there. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart beginning to pound. I had never put it there. I knew that for sure. I confronted her the next day, trying to keep my voice light, joking about how she must be planning to move in without telling me. She just smiled and shrugged, saying that maybe it had fallen in there by accident. But there was something in her eyes that made my stomach tighten, a look that flickered too fast to read, but it left me feeling uneasy. I started paying more attention after that. I checked my closets, my drawers, even the space behind my couch, and I kept finding things. A scarf stuffed into the corner of a cabinet, a set of keys that did not belong to me, a pair of shoes half hidden under a pile of laundry. I knew she had been bringing her things over, but this was different. This was deliberate. These were not just casual items she had left behind. They were tucked away, placed in spots where they would not easily be noticed. It was like she was slowly planting pieces of herself throughout my home, like she was trying to make it hers without me realizing. I decided to test something. I left for work one morning, but doubled back 5 minutes later and parked down the street where she could not see me. I waited, watching my house, and sure enough, 15 minutes later, she arrived. She let herself in with the key I had given her a while ago, the one I had assumed she only used when I invited her over. But she did not text me to say she was there. She did not call. She just went inside as if she already lived there. I watched from my car, my chest tightening as the minutes passed. She stayed for nearly an hour before leaving, carrying what looked like a small bag. When I finally went inside, I checked every inch of my house. More things had appeared. A stack of folded clothes in my closet, a hair tie wrapped around the doorknob of my bedroom, a coffee mug sitting next to mine on the kitchen counter. I felt sick. I realized then that she had been doing this for weeks, maybe months, slipping her belongings into my space like she was claiming territory, and I had not even noticed. I knew I had to put an end to it. I gathered everything I could find, every piece of clothing, every small item, every misplaced belonging that was not mine. I put them all in a box and drove to her place. I did not text or call. I just pulled into her driveway, set the box down, and knocked on her door. When she opened it, her eyes flickered to the box before meeting mine. There was no surprise on her face, no embarrassment, just a quiet sort of understanding, as if she had expected this moment to come. I told her I could not do this, that she could not stay at my place anymore. I expected anger or maybe tears, but she just smiled, a slow, eerie smile that sent a chill through my spine. She nodded once, picked up the box, and closed the door without a word. I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt watched. That night, I double-checked that my doors were locked, that my windows were secure, but I still could not shake the feeling that something was off. I woke up in the middle of the night to a soft creaking sound, the kind of sound a house makes when it is settling. But this was different. It was rhythmic, steady, like footsteps. My heart pounded as I reached for my phone, turning on the flashlight. I swept the beam across my room, expecting to see nothing, but then I saw it. A sliver of movement near my closet door. My breath caught in my throat as I stared, frozen. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to reveal a pair of eyes watching me from the darkness. My entire body went cold. I scrambled out of bed, fumbling for the light switch, but by the time I turned it on, the closet was empty. Nothing was there, but I knew what I saw. I knew she had been there. I tore open the door, checked every inch of my apartment, but she was gone. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing was missing. But I found one last thing that made my blood run cold. Tucked under my pillow was a note, written in her handwriting. 3 simple words that made my stomach twist. You are mine. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, I changed the locks, installed cameras, and made sure she had no way of getting back in. But even now, months later, I still wake up in the middle of the night, expecting to see those eyes watching me from the shadows. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I swear I can hear the soft creak of a closet door opening somewhere in the dark. They say you never really know someone until you see them at their worst. I learned that lesson the hard way on what was supposed to be a simple second date. I had only met her a week before at a coffee shop, and she seemed normal enough. Pretty, charming, a little too eager maybe, but nothing that felt off. I was new in town, still finding my way around, so I thought renting a nice place for the weekend would make for a great time. Something comfortable, a change of pace. She was excited when I invited her over, said she would bring a bottle of wine. I remember thinking it was sweet, that maybe she was the kind of girl who put effort into things. I did not know how wrong I was. The night started well. She showed up in a red dress, her hair curled, smelling like vanilla and cheap perfume. We had drinks, ordered takeout, and everything was fine until she insisted on more alcohol. She drank like she was trying to forget something, like she needed to be numb. At first, it was funny. She got giggly, a little clumsy, but then it changed. We went to a nearby bar, and she kept ordering shots, one after another. Her eyes started to glaze over. Her speech got slurred, and then she did something I never expected. A guy brushed past her on his way to the restroom, barely even noticed her, but she turned on him like an animal, started screaming, accusing him of shoving her, calling him names that made the entire place go silent. The bouncer stepped in, tried to calm her down, And that is when she raised her hand to slap him. She barely missed. He grabbed her wrist and told me to take her home before she got herself into trouble. People were staring. Some were laughing. I should have left her there, but I didn't. I took her back to the apartment, half carrying her because she could barely walk. She kept mumbling to herself, something about how men always ruined everything, how she could not trust anyone. It put me on edge, but I told myself she was just drunk, nothing more. When we got inside, I helped her to the bed, pulled off her shoes, and went to get her some water. I thought she had passed out. When I came back, she was sitting up, staring at the wall. Her eyes were so empty, like she was somewhere else entirely. I asked if she was okay, and she did not answer, just sat there, swaying slightly. Then she turned her head toward me, slow and unnatural, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Her lips moved, but the voice that came out did not sound like hers. It was deep, wrong, like someone else was speaking through her. "You brought me back here. Now you have to keep me." My stomach twisted. I laughed nervously, trying to shake it off. Drunk people say weird things, but she just kept staring, her pupils blown wide, her skin unnaturally pale. I set the water down, stepped back, told her to sleep it off. She did not respond. I turned off the lights and went to the couch. I could not shake the feeling that something was off. The air felt heavy, thick, with something unspoken. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to a sound, a soft, wet sound. I sat up, my heart pounding. It was coming from the bedroom. I got up, pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. My breath caught in my throat. She was standing in the corner, her back to me, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. A dark stain spread across the carpet beneath her feet. I stepped closer, squinting in the dim light. And then I understood. She was urinating, just standing there, completely still, relieving herself like some kind of animal. I wanted to speak, to say anything, but my voice caught in my throat. My skin crawled. Something about the way she stood, motionless except for the steady trickle, made my body scream at me to run, but I did not. I forced myself to say her name. No response. I said it again, louder this time. She turned around so suddenly that I stumbled back. Her face was blank. No shame, no recognition, just emptiness. Then she smiled. A slow, stretched smile that looked painful, like her skin was too tight. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just a soft, dry heave. My stomach turned. I could not do this. I told her I was calling her a cab, that she had to leave. I expected her to fight me, to argue, to lash out, but she did not. She just walked past me, dragging her bare feet across the wet carpet, leaving damp footprints as she moved. I did not take my eyes off her until she was gone. I scrubbed the carpet for hours, but the smell never completely went away. The next day, I tried to find her online, to figure out who she really was, but her number was disconnected. Her social media was gone. It was like she had never existed. A week later, I was packing up to leave the apartment when I found something. A note, tucked under the couch cushion. 3 words. "He brought me back." My hands went cold. I had no idea how it got there. I still do not. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I hear that wet sound again, dripping from the corner of my room, and I wonder if she ever really left. I always thought the worst thing I had ever done was stand someone up on a date, but I had no idea that it would follow me like a shadow I could never escape. It started as a joke, a casual request. Really, I had been hanging out with this girl Vanessa for a while, and she always talked about her best friend, Emily. She made her sound like the most amazing person in the world, and I guess I got curious. I begged Vanessa to set us up, telling her over and over again that I was serious, that I wanted to meet Emily, that she should make it happen. Vanessa finally caved and arranged everything. We were supposed to meet at this quiet little restaurant. A nice place, nothing too fancy. But that night, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I got too drunk. I had meant to just take the edge off, loosen up before the date, but I passed out in my apartment instead. By the time I woke up, hours had passed, and I had missed the whole thing. I barely even cared. I sent a lazy apology to Vanessa, saying it was no big deal, and that I would make it up to Emily later. I thought they were being dramatic when they both stopped talking to me. I shrugged it off and moved on. That was my second mistake. A week later, strange things started happening. It was small at first. My apartment felt off. The air seemed heavier, like it had a pulse of its own. I kept waking up in the middle of the night with a sick feeling in my stomach, like someone had been watching me while I slept. My phone would vibrate with notifications, but when I checked, there was nothing there. Then there were the dreams. Vivid, too real, like memories I had forgotten but somehow relived every night. I would see myself at that restaurant, sitting at the table where I should have met Emily, but the place was empty, except for her. She sat there, motionless, her face blurred like a painting smeared by careless hands. She did not speak. She only stared, as if waiting for something. When I woke up, my mouth was dry, my hands shaking. It was just a dream, I told myself, but it did not stop. The dreams became worse. Emily's face, once just a blur, started to take shape. Her eyes were wide, too wide, her mouth slightly open as if she were whispering something I could not hear. The restaurant around her would darken, the walls stretching like they were swallowing us both. Then I started hearing my name, not just in the dreams, but when I was awake. It would come from the corners of my apartment, from behind me when I was alone. A soft voice, barely above a whisper, always calling, never answering when I asked who was there. I convinced myself I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. One night, I woke up to find my phone screen on, the dim light barely illuminating my room. A single message stared back at me. You should have come. I sat up, heart pounding, my breath caught in my throat. It was from a number I did not recognize. My hands trembled as I typed back, "Who is this?" No reply came, but the air in the room grew thick, pressing against me like a heavy weight. The silence was unbearable. I did not sleep again that night. Things escalated quickly after that. My reflection in the mirror seemed wrong, slightly delayed, moving in a way that did not match me. My apartment door would be unlocked when I knew I had locked it. I heard footsteps in the hall at night, soft and deliberate. But the worst part was the calls. At first, they came at random times. The number was always unknown. I never picked up. Then one night, just past midnight, I gave in. I answered, pressing the phone to my ear, heart hammering. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then, I heard it, a soft breath, slow and shallow, followed by a single whisper, "You should have come." My stomach dropped. My body went cold. I ended the call and threw my phone across the room. But the whisper did not stop. It was in the room with me. I turned my head so slowly I thought my neck would snap from the tension. And there she was, Emily, or something that had once been Emily. She stood in the corner of my room, her body wrong, twisted in a way that made my skin crawl. Her neck was bent too far to the side, her mouth hanging open like a puppet with broken strings. But it was her eyes that sent terror through my bones. They were empty, just black voids, deep and endless, swallowing all the light in the room. Her mouth moved, forming words, but no sound came out. Then she took a step forward, her body jerking like something unfinished, something trying to remember how to move. I scrambled back, nearly falling off the bed, my voice caught in my throat, my limbs frozen in fear. Then she spoke, and this time I heard her loud and clear. "You should have come." The room went dark. The air turned ice cold. And then, nothing. I woke up hours later, my body drenched in sweat. My room was normal again. The air was still. My phone was on the floor, screen cracked. No messages, no calls. But I knew it had happened. I felt it deep in my bones. I did not go back to sleep. I could not. The next day, I did the only thing I could think of. I called Vanessa. She did not pick up. I tried again and again. Finally, she answered, her voice tired, wary. I told her everything, spilling the words in a frantic rush. She was silent for a long time. Then she said something that made my blood turn to ice. "That is impossible. Emily has been missing for over a year. No one has seen her since she went on a date with some guy who never showed up." My hands went numb. My head spun. I could barely breathe. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that it was not possible, but deep down, I knew exactly what had happened. And I knew one thing for certain. Emily was never missing. She was waiting, and I had finally come. I still remember the excitement I felt that evening, the kind that makes your hands shake a little as you fix your hair in the mirror. His name was Daniel, 25 years old, handsome in a quiet way. We had been talking online for weeks, and he was the kind of man who listened, who remembered little things about me that others ignored. He knew my favorite song, the way I took my coffee, and even the silly little childhood dream I once had of becoming a famous singer. It felt like I had finally found someone who understood me. The restaurant was warm, filled with soft candlelight, and the quiet murmur of other couples lost in their own worlds. I could barely believe I was there, sitting across from him, watching his fingers drum lightly against the table as he smiled at me. His eyes were dark, focused, the kind that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. But there was something else, something in the way he looked at me, like he was studying me too closely. I ignored it. I wanted this to be perfect. As the night went on, we talked about everything and nothing at all. He told me about his love for old mystery novels, how he liked to go on late-night drives just to clear his mind. He had a way of making ordinary things sound interesting. But there was one thing that stuck in my mind, a tiny detail he had mentioned so casually I almost missed it. He had been homeschooled for a while because of some family trouble, then finished high school later than most people. It was a strange thing to share on a first date, but I did not think much of it. The night ended with a soft hug, a promise to meet again soon. I felt light as I walked back to my car, heart still fluttering from his deep voice and the way his fingers had brushed against mine. But something felt off, a whisper in the back of my mind, telling me I had overlooked something. The feeling followed me home. It sat with me as I changed into my pajamas, lingered as I scrolled through my phone, trying to find anything about him that I might have missed. His social media was normal, pictures of books, coffee shops, the occasional blurry photo of a city skyline at night. But there was something unsettling about how little there was from his past. No childhood photos, no high school memories, nothing before the age of 18. That whisper in my mind grew louder. I told myself I was being paranoid, that not everyone posted their entire life online. But I could not shake the feeling that there was something he was not telling me. I searched his name. At first, nothing unusual came up. A few old accounts with no profile pictures, a common enough name that led to dozens of different people. But then, deep in the search results, I found something, a news article. The moment I saw the words, my breath hitched in my throat. 17-year-old boy convicted of murder. My stomach turned to ice as I clicked on the link. The article was old, nearly 8 years ago, but the details were there, clear as day. A young woman found in a wooded area. The crime so brutal that the details were sealed from the public. A suspect arrested weeks later. A teenage boy whose name was stated in black and white. Daniel, my Daniel. The man I had just spent the evening laughing with, sharing stories with. The man who had reached across the table and brushed a stray hair from my cheek. My hands trembled as I read further. The case had been controversial. He had been convicted, but because he was underage, he had only served a few years before being released. He had vanished after that, changed his last name, moved to another state. My breath was shallow, my skin cold. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. I tried to tell myself that people change, that maybe he had been a scared kid who had done something terrible, but had grown past it. But the way he had looked at me tonight, the intensity in his eyes, the way he had studied me so carefully, I could not unsee it now. A sudden thought sent a fresh wave of fear crashing over me. He knew where I lived. He had driven me home once when my car had trouble. He had seen my front door, my windows, the exact way my house sat back from the street where no one could see inside. My phone slipped from my hands as I bolted to the front door, checking the locks twice, 3 times. My mind was racing, screaming at me that I was not safe. I thought about calling the police, but what could I say? That I had just discovered my date had been a murderer as a teenager, that I was scared because of a feeling. I turned off all the lights, hoping that if I could not see outside, then maybe he could not see inside either. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I crept to the window, peering through the smallest gap in the curtain. The street was empty. No cars, no movement, but I could not shake the feeling that he was out there, watching. I barely slept that night. Every sound made my breath hitch. Every shadow seemed to stretch too far into my room. By morning, I had made up my mind. I blocked his number, deleted every message, every trace of him from my life. I told myself that was the end of it, but the feeling never left. Weeks passed, and I still felt his eyes on me in crowded places. I still hesitated before unlocking my door, before walking alone at night. Then one evening, just as I was beginning to feel normal again, I found something on my doorstep, a single red rose. No note, no explanation, just the flower, sitting there, fresh, untouched. I stared at it for what felt like hours, my breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. I had never told him where I worked. I had never mentioned my new routine, the places I visited, and yet, somehow, he had found me. I never saw him again, but the fear remained. I changed apartments, switched jobs, even moved to another city. But sometimes, even now, I still check over my shoulder, expecting to see him standing there, watching. I still wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced that if I close my eyes for too long, I will open them to find him standing at the foot of my bed, waiting, because I know now what I did not want to believe that night. People do not change. They just learn to hide it better. I never liked online dating much, but that night, I thought I had met someone truly special. Her name was Emily, and she had a warm smile in her pictures that made her seem safe, like the kind of person who could light up a dull room. We had been texting for a couple of weeks, and everything about her felt easy. She was funny, sharp, and always knew the right thing to say. When she suggested we finally meet in person, I did not hesitate. We chose a quiet little cafe just outside the city, one of those places with dim lighting and soft music, where you could actually talk without yelling over the noise. I got there early, feeling that mix of nerves and excitement, but as soon as I saw her walk in, I knew something felt different. Maybe it was the way she looked around before sitting down, her eyes darting just a little too quickly, or the way she hesitated before smiling, like she was forcing it. Still, I pushed the thought away. telling myself I was just over-analyzing. The first 30 minutes were fine. We talked about our jobs, favorite movies, childhood memories. But then the conversation shifted in a way I never expected. She started talking about people, not just people, but certain groups, lowering her voice, as if she was sharing some grand secret. At first, I thought she was joking, making some dark humor remark that I just was not getting. But the longer she spoke, the more I realized she was not joking at all. Her words were slow, deliberate, and filled with an ugly certainty. My stomach turned as I listened to her speak about how she believed some people did not belong, how the world would be better if things were how they used to be. I felt my skin crawl, my hands tightening around the edge of the table as I forced a smile, nodding just enough to not cause a scene. My mind raced with excuses to leave, trying to figure out how to escape, without making it obvious that I wanted to get as far away from her as possible. I checked my phone, pretending I had an emergency, but she saw right through it. She leaned in slightly, tilting her head like she was studying me, and for the first time that night, I saw something behind her eyes that chilled me. There was no warmth there, only something calculating, something hollow. She smirked and said she understood, that sometimes people got nervous when they realized the truth. I did not respond, just stood up quickly and muttered something about needing to leave. She did not stop me, did not ask me to stay. She just sat there, watching me with that same smirk, as if she had expected this all along. I stepped outside, breathing in the cold air, my hands shaking as I walked quickly toward my car. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt this unbearable weight of unease pressing down on me. I should have blocked her number right then, deleted every trace of her, but some twisted part of me needed to see if she would message me first. I did not have to wait long. My phone buzzed before I even made it home, a simple message that sent ice through my veins. It said she was glad we met, that it was rare to find someone like me, that she knew I was different. I did not reply. I wanted to pretend this night never happened, but the messages kept coming. They were never angry, never demanding, just observant. She would comment on little things, like how I walked fast when I was nervous, how I tapped my fingers on the table when I was thinking, how my jacket was a little too big for me, things that made me wonder how much she had been watching me. Then, the messages became something worse. She started mentioning things I had not told her, things she should not have known. That my office had a flickering light right above my desk, that I always stopped at the same gas station on my way home, that I took my coffee black with just a little sugar. I barely slept for the next few nights, every sound outside my apartment making me jump, every shadow in the hallway looking like it was watching me. I blocked her, deleted everything, convinced myself it was over. But the worst part came when I got home one night and found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a single piece of paper, neatly folded, with just one sentence written in perfect handwriting. I know where you live. I moved out a week later, packed up everything I owned, and left that city without telling anyone where I was going. I never went back, never checked to see if she had tried to find me. Some nights, though, when I am alone and everything is too quiet, I think about that date, about the way she looked at me, about how easily she had hidden who she really was behind a warm smile. And I wonder how many others like her are out there, waiting, watching, knowing exactly where you live before you even realize what you have let in. I never liked online dating much. Something about meeting a stranger and trying to force a connection over dinner always felt awkward to me. But after months of pressure from friends telling me to put myself out there, I finally gave in. That is how I met Lisa. She seemed normal enough at first. Her pictures were nice, and her messages were friendly. We talked for a week before deciding to meet up for dinner. A simple, safe, public place. I even picked a restaurant that was always packed, so I would not have to worry about the whole awkward silence thing. I thought I was being careful, but I had no idea how wrong I was. The moment I walked into the restaurant and saw Lisa sitting at the table, something felt off. It was not her appearance. She looked just like her pictures, maybe a little paler, but still pretty. It was something about her eyes. They were too wide, too unblinking, like she had been staring at the door for hours, waiting for me to arrive. When I sat down, she immediately leaned forward and grinned in a way that sent a chill down my spine. Before I could even say hello, she reached into her purse and pulled something out. My stomach dropped. It was a knife. Not just a pocket knife or a small blade. It was large, gleaming under the dim lights of the restaurant. The kind of knife you would see in a horror movie. She placed it carefully on the table next to her plate and smiled like it was the most normal thing in the world. I forced a chuckle, trying to keep my voice steady. "That is a pretty big knife," I said, hoping she would laugh and say it was some kind of joke. But she did not laugh. She beamed. "Oh, this is just one of my favorites," she said, running her fingers along the blade. "I collect knives, all kinds." She picked it up, tilting it in the light. "I like how they feel, how they cut, how sharp they can get." My hands felt clammy as I reached for my water, my throat suddenly dry. "That is interesting," I managed to say. She nodded eagerly. "You would not believe how many I have. Hundreds. Big ones, small ones, curved, serrated. Some of them are antiques. Some of them are from very special places. I even have a few that were actually used, for things." My fingers tensed around my glass. "Used for what?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She tilted her head, her smile stretching wider. "Oh, things." The way she said it made my stomach churn. The way she stared at me, unblinking, her fingers tracing the edge of the knife, made my skin crawl. I needed to get out of there. Fast. I laughed awkwardly, trying to think of a reason to leave, without making it obvious that I was terrified. But she was watching me so intently, so eagerly, like she was waiting for something. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me for a second. I need to use the restroom." I pushed my chair back and stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. She watched me go, her smile never fading. I walked as casually as I could toward the bathroom, but the moment I was out of her line of sight, I bolted, straight past the bathroom, straight out the door. I did not stop until I was 2 blocks away, gasping for breath, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. I pulled out my phone and blocked her number immediately. Then I called the restaurant, telling them there was a woman inside with a large knife on the table, hoping they would do something, anything. But by the time they checked, she was gone. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hello." Silence. Then, a soft giggle. "Found you." My blood turned to ice. I hung up immediately, my hand shaking. A second later, my phone buzzed again. A message this time. It was a picture of my apartment, taken from outside. I jumped up and ran to my window, my breath caught in my throat. The street was empty. No sign of her. No movement. But she had been there. She had found out where I lived. I locked every door, every window, turned off all the lights, and sat in the darkness, my pulse hammering in my ears. The next morning, I went straight to the police. They took my report, but did not seem too concerned. "Probably just a prank," they said. "Some weird girl trying to scare you." They promised to look into it, but I could tell they did not think it was serious. For the next few days, nothing happened. No calls, no messages, no signs of her. I started to believe it really was just some sick joke. Maybe she had moved on to someone else. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But then, a week later, I found something on my doorstep. A small package wrapped in brown paper. No name, no address. My hands trembled as I picked it up and unwrapped it. Inside was a knife, the same one she had brought to the restaurant. Sharp, gleaming, clean. And next to it, a note. Just 3 words. I like you. I dropped the knife and stumbled back, my chest tightening. I moved out that same week, changed my number, deleted all my social media. I never went on another date after that, and I never stopped looking over my shoulder, because I know she is still out there, somewhere, watching, waiting, and I do not think she was joking when she said she liked how sharp her knives could get. I never thought something as simple as a dating profile could lead to something so terrifying. I'd always been clear about my allergy to cats. It was right there on my profile in plain text. No cats. Severe allergy. But for some reason, people thought it was something they could work around or even hide. I noticed it in small ways at first. Women I matched with would talk about their pets but conveniently forget to mention they had a cat. I would find out only when I went to their place and started feeling my throat tighten and my eyes burn. Some apologized. Others just shrugged it off like it was no big deal. It was frustrating, but I brushed it aside. It was just part of dating. Until her. She was different from the start. Her messages were warm, but vague. She never talked about pets or her home life. Just little things. Things she noticed about my pictures. Things she imagined I would like. It felt personal, thoughtful, like she had studied me in some way. We talked for weeks before finally agreeing to meet in person. She suggested a cafe, a quiet place that seemed safe enough. When I walked in, I noticed something immediately. The air felt thick, almost damp. The smell was strange too, like something sweet trying to cover up something foul. I scanned the room and saw her sitting by the window, waving at me with a small smile. She was exactly like her pictures, perfectly put together, a little too perfect. I sat down across from her, and she reached for my hand before I could even settle in. Her fingers were ice cold. The first thing she said was, "I am so glad you finally came." Her voice was soft, almost whispery, but there was something else underneath it, something I could not place. I smiled politely and tried to ignore the way my skin prickled. We talked for a while, but the whole time, I felt a strange itch creeping up my arms. I rubbed at them absent-mindedly, thinking maybe I had brushed against something outside, but it got worse. My throat started to feel dry, tight. I tried to focus on her words, but the feeling of something crawling on my skin was unbearable. I glanced down at my sleeve and froze. A single cat hair, long, white. I looked around. There were no cats here, none at all. I cleared my throat and asked her if she had a cat. Her expression did not change, but she tilted her head slightly. "Why do you ask?" she said. Her voice was still soft, too soft. I told her about my allergy, about how even a little bit of cat hair could trigger a reaction. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, watching me with wide eyes. "You should be more careful," she whispered. Her breath smelled sweet, but underneath it, there was something rotten. My skin was burning now. My eyes started to water. I pushed back my chair, suddenly feeling like I needed to get out of there. But she reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. "Hard. You are going to leave so soon," she said. I tried to pull away, but her grip was like iron. My vision blurred, my chest tightened, and I felt my breathing become shallow. Then she smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made my stomach drop. "You always leave," she said. My ears started to ring. The cafe around me seemed to fade. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was her face, perfectly calm, perfectly still, watching me as if she had been waiting for this moment. I woke up in my apartment, my own bed. My head was pounding, my throat was raw. I sat up too fast, and the room spun around me. I reached for my phone, but my hand trembled so badly I could barely hold it. There was a message from her. Just 2 words. Welcome home. My stomach twisted. I had no memory of getting home. No memory of anything after she grabbed my wrist. I scrambled out of bed and ran to the mirror. My reflection looked wrong. My eyes were bloodshot. My skin was pale. And then I saw it. The long white hairs clinging to my shirt, to my neck, to my mouth. I gagged and ripped my shirt off, but the hairs were still there. They were on my skin, embedded, moving. I clawed at them, but they only burrowed deeper. I screamed. I begged, but they would not stop. I stopped dating after that. I deleted my profile, blocked every number. I barely left my apartment, but it did not matter, because the hairs never went away. I would wake up with them in my bed, in my food, clogging the drain. No matter how much I cleaned, no matter how much I burned, they always came back. And at night, I feel something brush against my skin, a soft, slow movement, a tail curling around my leg, a whisper against my ear, "You should be more careful." But when I turn on the light, there is nothing there, nothing at all, just the feeling of something watching, waiting, because she knows I can never leave now. She made sure of it. They say love blinds you to the truth, makes you ignore the things that should make you run. I never believed that until I met Olivia. She was perfect, or at least she seemed that way. The kind of woman who made you feel like the world was softer just because she was in it. Her laughter was light, her eyes full of secrets, and when she looked at me, I felt like I was the only man alive. We met in the most ordinary way, a coffee shop on a rainy evening, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, steam curling up like a ghost between us. She had this way of making every moment feel like it belonged in a movie. The way she would tilt her head when she listened, the way she would hum quietly when she was lost in thought. I fell hard, I fell fast, and I fell into something I never could have imagined. At first, it was just little things, quirks that made her different. She never let me into her bathroom, always locking the door, even when she was just brushing her teeth. Her wardrobe had a section she never opened, no matter how many times I saw her go in there to grab clothes. I figured she just had things she wanted to keep private. Everyone does. But then there was the smell. A strange, sharp scent that clung to her skin no matter how much perfume she wore. It wasn't bad exactly, just odd, like something faintly sour beneath the floral notes. When I asked her about it, she laughed, brushing it off, telling me I was imagining things. Maybe I was. Maybe I wanted to believe her more than I wanted to believe my own senses. Love does that to you. The first time I noticed something truly wrong, we were getting ready for a dinner date. She was in her bedroom, the door slightly open, and I saw her doing something I couldn't quite understand. She had a small glass bottle in her hands, rolling it over her wrist like perfume. But there was no label on the bottle, and the liquid inside was a strange yellow tint. I must have made a noise because she turned so fast I barely saw her move. Her smile was too wide, too forced. She grabbed her purse and kissed me quickly, steering me out the door before I could ask what it was. My stomach felt uneasy the whole night, like my body knew something my mind wasn't ready to accept. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. It sneaks into your thoughts, whispering questions you wish you could ignore. A few days later, while she was at work, I found myself standing in front of her wardrobe, the section she never touched. The door creaked as I pulled it open, and inside, neatly arranged on the shelf, were glass jars. Dozens of them, the same kind she had used that night before our date. My breath caught in my throat as I reached for one, my fingers shaking. The liquid inside was golden, thick, the scent sharp and unmistakable. It was urine, stacked in perfect rows, each jar sealed tight, some with little labels. My mind refused to process it. refused to make sense of the horror sitting in front of me. But then I saw the names, tiny, neat handwriting on each lid, and I recognized them. Names she had mentioned before in passing. X's. The realization hit me like ice in my veins. She was collecting these, keeping them like trophies. My stomach twisted, and I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. The scent was suddenly overwhelming, clinging to my skin, my clothes. It was the smell that had always lingered on her, the one she had always masked with perfume. I was going to be sick. I forced myself to breathe, forced myself to think. I needed to get out. I needed to leave before she came home. But as I turned, the door clicked shut behind me. My heart stopped. Olivia stood there, her eyes dark, lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. "You were not supposed to see that," she said softly, tilting her head. Her voice was calm, too calm. My body screamed at me to run, but my legs felt heavy, locked in place by the weight of my own terror. I stammered something, some weak excuse, but she just watched me, her fingers brushing over one of the jars, tracing the glass like it was something precious. "You do not understand," she whispered. "It is not what you think." But I did understand. I understood too well. My mind flashed through every moment, every strange little thing I had ignored, every odd scent, every locked door. It all made sense now, in the worst way possible. I bolted, pushed past her so hard she stumbled, her laughter ringing out behind me as I ran. I did not stop, did not look back, not even when I heard her call my name in that same gentle voice, like nothing was wrong. I drove home with shaking hands, locked every door, every window. I did not sleep that night. I did not sleep for many nights after that. My phone buzzed endlessly with messages I refused to read, calls I refused to answer, and then, one morning, the messages stopped. Silence. But it did not feel like peace. It felt like waiting, like the moment before something terrible happens. I moved cities, changed my number, burned every memory of her from my life. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I catch that scent again, sharp and sour, beneath something floral, and I know she is out there, watching, waiting, collecting. I still remember the way he disappeared from my life like I had never existed. 7 months of being together, making memories, late night calls, whispered promises about the future, and then one day, nothing. No explanation, no fight, no final words. Just silence. At first, I thought something had happened to him, but he was still active online, still posting, still living, just without me. It was humiliating, heartbreaking, and I spent months trying to figure out what I had done wrong. But time passed, and eventually, I forced myself to move on, burying the anger and confusion beneath the weight of everyday life. And then, 10 months later, just as I had begun to forget the sound of his voice, my phone lit up with his name. A simple message. "Hey, how have you been?" For a long time, I just stared at it, feeling the old wounds rip open again. Why now? Why, after all this time? The rational part of me screamed to ignore him, to delete the message and keep moving forward. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. My fingers betrayed me before my mind could stop them, and I found myself replying, asking him why he had ghosted me. His response came almost immediately. "I never ghosted you. I had no choice. Please, you have to listen to me." Something about that message made my stomach twist. It was too dramatic, too unnatural, like he was trying to scare me on purpose. I rolled my eyes and replied with sarcasm, asking him what kind of excuse he had for abandoning me without a word. His next message made my breath hitch. "It is watching us. It never let me leave." My fingers hovered over the screen, my heart pounding. Was this some kind of twisted joke? Was he drunk? Was he trying to manipulate me again? Anger bubbled in my chest, but before I could type a response, another message appeared. Please, I just need to know. Have you seen it too? A chill ran down my spine. Seen what I typed? My fingers shaking slightly. I waited, the seconds stretching into eternity. Then, finally, he replied, You do not remember, do you? The night before I disappeared, we were together at my apartment. It was late, and I told you about the thing that kept standing outside my window. You thought I was just tired, that I was seeing things, but it was real. It was always real. And when you left that night, it followed you. I felt a strange sensation creep up my back, a feeling I had not experienced in a long time. I did not remember any of that. I remembered being at his apartment that night. Sure, but nothing strange had happened. It had been just like any other night. But the way he was speaking, the panic in his words, it made something deep inside me stir, something I could not quite place. Stop messing with me, I typed. But before I could press send, a new message appeared. Check your pictures. That was all it said. My chest tightened. I almost ignored him, almost turned off my phone and walked away. But something stopped me. I opened my gallery, scrolling back to the night he disappeared. And then I saw it. A photo I did not remember taking. It was a blurry image of my reflection in a dark window, my face half lit by the glow of my phone screen. But behind me, in the darkness outside, was something else. A shape, a figure standing just beyond the glass, barely visible, its face nothing more than a pale smudge of light. I felt sick. My hands went cold. I closed the gallery and went back to our chat, my heartbeat slamming in my ears. What is this? I typed, my breath coming in short gasps. He responded almost instantly. It is why I left. It would not let me stay. It wanted you instead. And then, before I could react, before I could even process what I was reading, another message came through. It knows we are talking. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. A deep, crushing sense of dread pressed against my chest as I forced myself to look up from my phone. My apartment was quiet, still, but the shadows seemed deeper than before. I did not want to, but I turned toward the window. The reflection stared back at me, my face pale and wide-eyed. And then, behind me, in the darkness just beyond the glass, something shifted. My blood turned to ice. I dropped my phone, the screen cracking as it hit the floor, but I did not care. I could not move, could not breathe. The figure in the reflection was no longer just a blur. It was staring at me, its face featureless, its body pressed against the glass like it was trying to get inside. And then, slowly, impossibly, it raised one hand and knocked. The sound was soft but deliberate, a hollow tap that echoed through the silence. My legs finally obeyed me, and I stumbled backward, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My phone screen flickered where it lay on the floor, another message from him lighting up the shattered display. Do not open the door. No matter what you hear, do not let it in. The knocking continued, steady, patient, growing louder with each passing second. And then, the worst part. My phone vibrated again, another message appearing. My stomach dropped. It is inside. Run. I always thought online dating was a harmless thrill, a way to break the monotony of my routine. The excitement of meeting someone new, the anticipation of seeing where the night would lead. It all felt like a game that I could control. But games can be rigged, and I learned that lesson in the most horrifying way possible. It started with a woman named Aurora. Her profile was simple but striking. A single photo of her smiling in soft candlelight, her eyes shadowed just enough to make you wonder what secrets they hid. Her messages were playful, teasing, making it clear she knew how to hold a man's attention. She wanted to meet that same night. A spontaneous adventure, she called it. I hesitated for a moment. Something about her eagerness felt off, but the allure of mystery was too strong. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. After all, what was the worst that could happen? She chose a dimly lit lounge off the strip, one of those places that felt intimate but carried the weight of 100 quiet conversations. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth near the back, swirling a deep red drink in her glass. She looked even more captivating in person, but there was something almost too perfect about her. Her hair fell in soft waves. Her dress hugged her frame in a way that felt calculated rather than effortless. When she smiled, it was just a little too slow, like she was measuring my reaction. I told myself I was imagining things. We talked. She laughed at my jokes, touched my arm at just the right moments. It was easy to forget the unease crawling at the back of my mind. The drinks flowed, but she never finished hers, just let the ice melt as she watched me sip mine. The room felt warmer, my limbs heavier, my thoughts slower. I told myself it was just the alcohol, but when she leaned in close and whispered that we should go somewhere more private, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a terrible mistake. The taxi ride was a blur, her voice soothing as she traced lazy circles on my wrist. My head throbbed, my stomach churned, but her touch anchored me, made it hard to think about anything else. Her apartment was in a quiet part of town, the kind of place that felt too empty, too pristine. The moment we stepped inside, a wave of dizziness hit me so hard, I had to grab the wall to steady myself. She smiled, guided me to the couch, her hands cool against my burning skin. "Relax," she murmured. "Let me take care of you." My body refused to move, my arms leaden at my sides. Panic surged through me as I realized I couldn't even lift my head. Her face hovered above mine, no longer warm, no longer inviting, just blank, detached. "You should have been more careful," she said, her voice devoid of the sweetness it held before. The room tilted, darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision. The last thing I saw was her standing over me, tilting my wallet in her hands, her expression one of pure indifference. I woke up alone. The sun was streaming through the blinds, casting cruel light on the wreckage of my night. My pockets were empty, my phone gone. My body ached in ways I couldn't explain, a deep, hollow pain that made me wonder just how long I had been unconscious. I staggered to my feet, every movement sending sharp jolts of nausea through my skull. The apartment was silent, too silent. Something about it felt staged, like a set designed to look lived in, but lacking the soul of a real home. The kitchen was spotless, the sink dry, the fridge empty. There were no personal items, no photos, no signs that anyone had ever truly lived there. My stomach twisted as I stumbled toward the door, my fingers fumbling with the lock. The hallway outside was just as eerie, stretching in both directions with no sound, no movement. I forced myself forward, the walls seeming to close in with every step. I needed to get out, needed to find help, but when I reached the elevator and saw my reflection in the mirrored doors, a cold wave of terror washed over me. My eyes were sunken, my skin an unnatural shade of gray. Something had been taken from me, something more than just money. I didn't know what, but I could feel it, an emptiness, gnawing at the edges of my being. I made it home, but I was never the same after that night. I tried to convince myself it was just a robbery, that I had been careless, but the news told a different story. They found bodies, men who had gone on dates with a woman named Aurora, men who never woke up. The reports said they had been drugged, drained of everything valuable before being discarded like broken toys. My heart pounded as I read, my fingers tracing the blurry photo of the woman who had lured them in. It was her, the same soft waves in her hair, the same candlelit smile, only this time her eyes weren't shadowed. They were staring directly into the camera, cold and empty. They never caught her. The reports faded, new headlines took their place, and the world moved on. But I couldn't. I felt her presence everywhere, in the flicker of a shadow just out of sight, in the whisper of a voice that didn't belong. I changed my number, deleted every dating app, but it didn't matter. The damage was already done. Sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the night with the taste of that drink still on my tongue, my body heavy, my limbs useless, and I wonder if she ever really let me go, or if I'm just waiting for the night she decides to come back and finish what she started. I never thought I would be telling this story, but I need to warn others about what happened to me. Have you ever met someone online who seemed perfect, only to discover they were hiding something terrible? That's what happened to my friend Alex, or at least, that's what I thought, until I realized the truth was much worse. It started 6 months ago, when Alex told me about this amazing girl he had been talking to online named Vanessa. They had been video chatting for weeks, and she was everything he wanted. Beautiful, funny, shared all his interests, and always seemed to say the perfect thing. I was happy for him, though something felt off about how perfect she sounded. Alex lived in a small town with not much happening, so when Vanessa suggested coming to visit for a week, he was beyond excited and spent days cleaning his apartment and planning activities. The day finally arrived, and I got a strange text from Alex that just said, "She's here. She's different." I called him immediately, but he didn't pick up until later that night. When he finally called back, he sounded weird, like he was forcing himself to sound normal. He explained that the girl who showed up wasn't exactly like her pictures. She was heavier, her hair was different, and she barely talked or showed interest in anything he suggested. He felt catfished, but didn't want to be rude, since she had traveled so far, so he was just counting down the days until she left. I offered to come over to help make things less awkward, and he quickly agreed, almost too eagerly. When I arrived at his apartment the next day, something felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. The air was heavy and had a strange, almost medicinal smell. Alex opened the door looking exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. "She's in the bathroom," he whispered, pulling me inside. "She hardly talks, just sits there staring at her phone or at me. Last night I woke up at 3 a.m. and found her standing at the foot of the couch, just watching me sleep. I pretended to be asleep until she went back to the guest room. I tried to reassure him that it would just be a few more days, but then we heard the bathroom door open. The woman who walked out looked nothing like the pictures Alex had shown me. Yes, she was heavier and her hair was different, but there was something else, something in her eyes that made my skin crawl. She smiled at me, but the smile didn't reach her eyes, which remained cold and calculating. "Hi, I'm Vanessa," she said in a flat voice that sounded rehearsed. "Alex has told me so much about you." The way she emphasized my name made it sound like she had been practicing saying it. We all sat in the living room making painful small talk, and I noticed she never blinked when looking at either of us. Her responses came after slight delays, like she was processing how a normal person would respond. When Alex went to the kitchen to get drinks, she leaned toward me and whispered, "He's not what I expected either," then leaned back as if nothing had happened. Over the next few hours, I noticed more disturbing things. She kept touching her neck in the same spot, and once when she reached for her water glass, I saw what looked like a seam in her skin near her wrist. When I mentioned a movie we had all discussed in our group chat, she looked confused before quickly saying, "Oh yes, I loved that one." But Alex had never added her to our group chat. When I pointed this out later, Alex's face went pale. I've been having memory problems since she arrived, he admitted when she was out of earshot. This morning, I found pictures on my phone of me sleeping. I don't remember her taking them. He showed me his phone, and sure enough, there were dozens of photos of him sleeping from different nights, all taken from the same angle, standing over him. In some, there appeared to be a shadow of someone else in the room too, someone taller. I told Alex he needed to ask her to leave, but he seemed terrified of the idea. I tried last night, and she just stared at me for a full minute before saying, "But I'm having such a good time, Alex. We have 3 more days together." I didn't tell her it was 3 more days. I never mentioned how long she was staying. That night, I insisted on staying over, sleeping on the living room floor while Alex took the couch. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of whispering. Through barely open eyes, I saw Vanessa standing in the hallway, her back to me, whispering into her phone in a language I didn't recognize. The strange thing was, her voice kept changing, sometimes sounding deeper, sometimes with an accent. I heard Alex's name mentioned several times. When she turned around, I quickly closed my eyes, but not before seeing something that will haunt me forever. Her face looked loose somehow, like it wasn't sitting quite right on her skull. In the morning, I woke to find Alex cooking breakfast, looking worse than before. "She's in the shower," he said quietly. "Listen, last night I pretended to sleep, but watched her through my eyelashes. She took something out of her bag and rubbed it on her arms and face. It looked like glue. And then, I swear, I'm not making this up, she adjusted something under her ear, and her whole face shifted slightly. My blood ran cold as I remembered what I had seen in the night. I convinced Alex we needed to leave, to go to my place and call the police from there. He agreed, and we quickly grabbed his essential belongings while Vanessa was still in the bathroom. Just as we were about to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Leaving so soon, but we were just getting to know each other." I showed Alex, whose hands began to shake. We heard the bathroom door open, and without hesitation, we ran out of the apartment. In my car, Alex frantically told me more, how he had found strands of what looked like artificial hair in the guest room, how his food had tasted strange whenever she prepared it, how he kept losing time and finding himself in different rooms with no memory of how he got there. We drove straight to the police station, but when we tried to explain, they seemed skeptical. They took our statements and said they would send someone to check the apartment. That evening, an officer called to tell us they had found the apartment empty, with no sign anyone had been staying there besides Alex. The guest room was untouched, the sheets still crisp. They suggested Alex might be overworked or stressed. We knew better. 2 days later, Alex received a friend request from a different profile, a beautiful woman who shared all his interests. The first message read, "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we could try again. I'm different now, I promise. I can be whoever you want me to be." The profile picture changed slightly as we stared at it, the features subtly shifting into a new face. Alex deleted his social media accounts that day. Sometimes, I still wake up at night feeling like someone is watching me, and I check my phone for pictures I don't remember taking. The worst part is, we never found out who or what Vanessa really was, or how many others like her are out there, waiting to be invited in.